like scary movies?
Uh-huh. I'm getting ready to watch a video.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hi everybody, I'm George and welcome to a very special episode of The Best Little Horror House in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest at least. And today's guest is a big part of what makes today's special. He's been a collaborator with Best Little Horror House in Philly since the very beginning, which means his episode is, while still very good, before the show really found its footing, in my humble opinion. So I am delighted to welcome back to the show my pal Chris, formerly from Channel 83, risen again as Mount Molehill. Welcome, dude.
Glad to be back. I actually listened to that episode earlier today, and Jesus, was our audio terrible.
We've come a long way, Chris. We've come a long way. But I was really excited because we're doing a true follow-up to your original episode. And we're talking about Larry Cohen's It's Alive 3, Island of the Alive. And when I asked you about coming back on, you were definitely interested, but said that you agonized over your choice.
I did.
And do you want to talk a little bit about your thought process, some of the other considerations?
It was hard because the show, you choose the best horror movie ever made.
Right.
So once you're on it once, that should be a mic drop. You shouldn't have to come unless I think one person did change their mind. So that's a special case. But I did really have to think about it. And I watched probably like 4 or 5 movies when coming to this decision. You know, I rewatched Phase 4. Still a banger.
Yeah.
Still excellent. The one that I was really close to picking is a movie called Gakidama, which is basically the Japanese equivalent of It's Alive.
Oh, hell yeah.
But I felt that there wasn't enough meat on the bones about the movie itself. So what I was left with was It's Alive 2 or 3. And 3 is better than 2.
Yeah. Totally agree with that assessment. You know, it is really interesting to revisit the series, which I sort of went back and watched it at large in preparation for this instead of just the third. And once again, I was sort of struck by Larry's sort of insightful emphasis on the parents' emotional toll instead of just a body count. And I think that it just really comes from approaching it as a holistic story and not simply an exploitation joint. And for it to connect to your original pick of It's Alive, I think makes this a fitting pick because while you definitely established why It's Alive is the best horror movie ever made, certainly by virtue of having that as the foundation, this movie is also worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, parenthood is a recurring motif in his body of work, whether it's these 3 It's Alive movies or A Return to Salem's Lot, which was made like somewhat concurrently with this one.
Right. He said they ran it into it.
Yeah. Michael Moriarty plays another shitty father in that one. And there's another film he wrote called Misbegotten that's about a psychopathic sperm donor trying to kidnap a baby for whom he was the donor. So
tale as old as time, right?
Yeah, it comes up a lot.
Yeah, it definitely hits his classic themes. I do, before we even get into this, want to recommend people check out the 1984 Sight and Sound article, Cohen on Cohen, which can be found on the Internet Archive. He does a nice job summarizing his own history to that point without much puffery. And regarding It's Alive, he said, I simply wanted to tell this story. I didn't think It's Alive is more of a horror than, say, The Elephant Man. But it did cross my mind that if I could make a horror movie that made audiences actually shed a tear, it would be an accomplishment. In the credit sequence, when the flashlights merge into a blinding light, the audience was intentionally placed into the position of the hunted mutant. And I think mission accomplished. Part of what is so great about Larry's films is that sense of empathy and the sense of feeling that he really, really puts you as an audience into the monster's shoes, which is what horror is so great at. What the best horror is good at is making you sort of see the monster's point and empathize with them. And I think that for him to balance the emotionality of, yes, dealing with parenthood and the challenges that come with that, but also still doing a great horror movie is something that really does set him apart from a lot of other directors, to say nothing of doing it with the budgets that he did. Yeah,
I think that comes through in a lot of ways in this movie. And there were a couple of interesting things that I stumbled upon in preparing for this episode, I think we both watched the King Cohen documentary.
Right.
Which came out around like 2017. So like 2 years before he passed. So it's pretty, I would say all encompassing, but they sort of completely gloss over a lot of things that I think are important to his career. I like Maniac Cop. They don't talk about it at all.
Right. They show a poster one time.
Yeah. No, he didn't direct it. He still wrote it, and you can still feel his influence. But in that documentary, I think it was his first wife, Janelle Webb, that just sort of throws it out there that Larry's father passed away when Larry was 19. And also in that documentary, they sort of developed this theme of him gathering father figures throughout his life, like Bernard Herrmann and Sam Fuller. But these things are almost just an aside, which seems like a really weird thing to not follow up on when you're talking about this guy whose films often center around father figures and parenthood and stuff like that. So in a book called Larry Cohen, The Stuff of Gods and Monsters by Michael Doyle, which, as you can see, is a very thick book.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that's basically just a long form interview kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When he was asked about the relationship he had with his parents, he said, quote, "It was all right. It certainly got better as time went on, particularly my relationship with my father. He mellowed as he got older, but he was an unhappy man. He was unhappy with his work and was basically dissatisfied with his life, really. I think my father felt that family was a trap. In a way, I felt sorry for my father, too. I had sympathy for this man who basically had to support other people. My father had to go out to work every single day and bring home money to feed my mother, me, and eventually my sister. I felt bad that this entire burden was placed solely on his shoulders, and he had to do something for a living that gave him no pleasure." So,
wow,
interesting. And then when he was asked about how he came up with the idea for It's Alive, he said, "The early 1970s saw a lot of changes in the relationships between parents and their children. Many people watched their kids growing up and began to see their personalities, appearance, and habits change to such a degree the parents didn't recognize them anymore. It was impossible for them to relate to their offspring in any meaningful way as they once did. These kids also had a set of values that were vastly different from those of the previous generation. This not only caused parents to feel alienated from their children, it caused parents to be afraid of them because they didn't understand the way these young people were now living their lives." Again, interesting. But the writer of the book also asked him if there were any echoes of his parents in his work, and he said, "No, not at all. I don't see any connection between them in the work that I do.
Wow.
I haven't drawn upon them to create certain characters in my movies." And look, I get it. Someone who had two daughters who would have been around 9 and 7 years old when It's Alive came out, I get why you might be hesitant to say, "Oh yeah, this movie that's about like abortion rights and parenthood anxieties, it's totally autobiographical."
Right.
I get why you wouldn't want to say that, but I mean, if you grew up feeling like you're a burden and you're directly responsible for your parents' unhappiness, it seems quite possible that you yourself may have some serious anxieties around parenthood.
Definitely. I think there's a ton to dig into with that. They talk about how a gifted child is the same thing as a mutant child in terms of having to not fit into the patterns and deal with that as a family unit. You also mentioned the issue with the father having to sort of support the family and do something that brought him no joy. In the documentary, they also discuss a family member who was in entertainment and had to give it up, and like on their deathbed, his mother was like, "Promise me you'll stop playing music."
Banjo.
Yeah.
Which is such a funny last wish. Don't you ever pick up that fucking banjo again. But I guess kind of understandable because in the book he talks a little bit more about that, and his grandfather was actually doing like minstrel shows.
Oh boy.
So probably a good thing that he stopped doing that.
She was right. Oh my God. Wow. The documentary, look, didn't mention that. This is what we're saying. They glossed over a lot of stuff. I also did find another quote that I think ties pretty directly to what you're saying about that estrangement. You got to remember that It's Alive was started when there was a lot of estrangement between children and parents in America. Kids were dressing crazy, wearing their hair in threatening fashions, listening to music that frightened their parents, taking drugs, engaging in sex. Many parents were afraid of their children. A father shot dead his drug-addicted son. So the mutant baby was a symbol of children as complete strangers, frightening their parents and threatening the normalcy of the family. And just to tie that all together in terms of the disruption of feeling like you need more, right? Like you just need more attention or more out of school, more challenging work. It's very easy to see how he is putting himself into it in a way that it makes it truly comical for him to just be like, no, it's probably nothing.
So that book is obviously all in text. He does like to play coy, but I get the impression that he either truly believed that or was unwilling to examine that part of him, and that maybe it is autobiographical.
Yeah, for sure. So It's Alive also lays some of the foundational work for It's Alive 3, obviously, in terms of the success. The baby design was done by the legendary Rick Baker and is used as the launch pad for the growing children in Island of the Alive. It also uses the theme from the legendary Bernard Herrmann, who was reorchestrated for this third entry, but still obviously using it as the base. And there's a really funny quote from Larry about working with Herrmann saying, "His music was out of vogue. The big orchestral scores had been replaced by music with themes. Everyone wanted a Mancini score with a hit song in the title. So Benny began working for independent directors. Brian De Palma got him to do Sisters, and he was supposed to do The Exorcist, but he couldn't get along with the director, William Friedkin. Friedkin said, 'I want you to do a better score than you did for Citizen Kane.' To which Benny replied, 'Why didn't you make a better movie than Citizen Kane?'"
Fucking get his ass. Yeah, that must have been, I would hate to be in a room with William Friedkin and Bernard Herrmann from everything I've heard about them. They're both notoriously nightmares. Although, I mean, in Bernard Herrmann's defense, the worst stories I hear about him are Hitchcock and Friedkin,
right,
who are generally acknowledged to be assholes.
Certainly there's some self-defense happening. But so with Rick's effects and Benny's score and Larry's writing and the excellent pathos-filled performance of John P. Ryan, It's Alive is a hit both domestically and overseas, and the demand for a sequel is high. And thus, it lives again, which, as we have already discussed, Larry describes along with the first as a reflection of societal unease. And I find that it's very interesting for that to be not just a reactive movie, but to depict the reactivity of the era, which I think does also distinguish itself from its peers in a lot of ways, saying, like, look at parents sort of pulling away and treating their children like strangers, instead of just being like, children are strangers! How terrifying is this?
Yeah. I mean, there's some of that in this as well. It's never like, even though he's dealing with issues of the day, it's never a polemic. It's just like, gee, isn't this kind of fucking shitty for everyone?
Absolutely, yeah. Even as we'll talk about when it comes up, I'm sure, there's a moment that feels a lot like a commentary on the AIDS virus, and he was like, yeah, I wanted it to be that kind of commentary, but because people weren't talking about it, it kind of just has to be this passing allusion to it. And so you go like, oh wow, that's interesting that it's in here. For it to be sort of so unfocused on definitely makes it striking.
Yeah. And one of the other things they talked about in that documentary that I kind of thought on a little bit is they talk about how he's like a rare triple hyphenate. He's a writer, director, producer on a lot of his films. And that the producer part is really what sets him apart. But I think also in a weird way, it's also part of the reason that people will often just watch one of his movies, like The Stuff, but never like go deeper into his filmography, because when you view them individually, they're all so singular that I think people just kind of assume that he was just like a one and done director, because that's is quite often the case with these 80s horror movies. I mean, Douglas Cheek directs Chud. Harry Bromley Davenport directs Extro. Great movies.
He honestly even reminds me of Charles Lawton directing Night of the Hunter in terms of the way people discussed his approach to directing as well.
Yeah. They're great movies, but it's like, you could be forgiven if while you're watching Extra thinking, like, there's no way they ever let this guy direct another movie. And you'd pretty much be right. But Larry being successful from a very early age and producing his own films meant that his career didn't start and stop with like his weirdo baby movie.
Right.
I mean, it's probably why, at least partly why, Frank Henenlotter has far fewer films than Larry Cohen. Very similar filmmakers, obviously very talented and with a strong cult following, but he doesn't have that third hyphenate. So
Definitely.
we get Basket Case trilogy and not a whole lot else.
I also found it really interesting during that part of the documentary where they discuss how those other parts of his career sort of came about in self-defense, in terms of like, he was tired of other people fucking up his writing, so he became a director, and he was tired of people fucking up his direction by being the money people, and so he said, fine, I'm going to just do that myself too. And that sort of true autorial stance, where he's like, I just need to be the one doing it all,
Yeah.
is very evident on screen.
Yeah, and also just like a very rare thing. I mean, he got lucky to be born at the time that he was, the golden age of television. He made a lot of money writing screenplays for TV shows,
Right.
which allowed him to do things like Bone and It's Alive.
Right, they had the house well before they started using it as a set in every fucking movie he ever did.
Paid for itself many times over.
So it's years after It Lives Again, and Larry goes to Warner Brothers looking for the rights to House of Wax. And they said, how about a sequel to Salem's Lot instead? And we'll bring you on with a 2-movie contract. Go right into It's Alive 3 with the same crew. And he had wanted to do Island of the Alive more than House of Wax anyway, so he said, okay, that works. The definition of one for you, one for me. Mm-hmm. For this movie, Larry promotes his longtime stunt coordinator, Paul Stater, to producer as a way to say thanks for the years of service. And you can definitely tell a stuntman had his hands on this. It is active as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Boat trips, street brawls, the works.
Yeah, there's some very funny things he said in the commentary about that we'll get to later.
Yeah. Larry said the locations in a boat made this the most complicated to shoot. Very believable, but it does look great on the 35mm film, high production value. And he talked about how, with the way that it's lit outside with what they had at the time, if they had tried to be like, oh, early CGI, there's just no way that it would hold up in the way that it does now.
Yeah, and I gotta say, 35mm with someone, like a crew of people that know what they're doing, you never would guess that this and Return to Salem's Lot were direct-to-video. They do not look like it at all.
Right, yeah. We've also got Karen Black in the limited but crucial role of Ellen. Larry said, she used to take acting quite seriously, which is something I never permit. That made me laugh, but he clarified that to him it's important they're relaxed to get a better, less self-conscious performance. And Karen was famously in Family Plot, and
Right.
Larry used to bust her chops with a Hitchcock impression, which he whipped out on the commentary, and I gotta say, not bad.
Agree to disagree. I didn't think it was great.
What? Man, it was better than I was expecting, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Based
fair.
on his extremely New York Jewish voice that he currently has, he went British in more than I was expecting.
Yeah. Better than I could do. I'll say that.
Yeah, there we go. This relaxed atmosphere he's looking for goes beyond just performances, though. He discussed at length in the commentary the improv-heavy nature of his movies. He doesn't have a production board or anything. He just, quote, carries the movie around in his head, which he admits is insane. But but it, combined with his hands-on nature, helps him to capture things in the moment. And a willingness to go with the flow is part of what he loved about the Double M himself, the man, the myth, the Michael, the Moriarty. I mean, he is rightfully incredibly complimentary of Michael Moriarty.
Yeah.
As one might imagine from their repeated work together, they're huge fans of each other. They hit it off. He loves his improv skills, and specifically the manic energy that he brings to the series for this one, which definitely helps set it apart from the first two, compared to John P. Ryan, who has that sort of steady, laconic energy instead. This is a huge shift. I think Michael Moriarty is an incredible actor, and I think that Larry Cohen really brings out the best in him. And just seeing him in the documentary speak so highly of him was really, heartwarming.
Yeah, there's a lot of sweet stuff like that, of just people genuinely seemed to like Larry a lot, which
Yeah.
is probably how he was friends with these people like Sam Fuller and Andre de Toth and Bernard Herrmann, is
Right.
that he just seemed like a genuinely sweet guy. And
Yeah.
I'll say it, Moriarty and Cohen, it's up there with Scorsese and De Niro. I'm not afraid to say it.
I agree. Hey, co-signed, Best Little Horror House, putting the stamp on it. Take that to the bank and see what they say.
I will also say that Moriarty has an Emmy and a Tony, so he is as close to an EGOT as Taylor Swift is.
There we go. There we go. And there's still time, right? Is he alive? Yeah, he's alive,
Well,
right?
he fucked off to Canada. He's in quote
They don't make
unquote
movies in Canada anymore. I hear.
political exile.
One other element of his approach that I thought was interesting is a lot of people try and go chronologically when possible to sort of let the actors work their way into it. But he said that he doesn't want to start with the boring expository scenes. Rather, let's jump in with the interesting and challenging ones to get the actors feeling involved and, quote, cooking as soon as possible. This also means just doing a read-through, no rehearsal, so it's still raw for them. You know, it definitely feels like a risk, but it's hard to argue with the vivacious results. These movies do have an incredible energy and vivaciousness to them.
Yeah, I mean, not being an actor, I can just imagine, like, some of that stuff has to be so frustrating for some people, which I think is probably a huge reason why he has his recurring cast of characters, because it's got to be frustrating to not have a true script and everything on the fly, you know?
Right.
Just me, I would need more structure than that, but I'm not an actor, so
There we
who
go.
can
Hey,
say?
you're in one Larry movie and out.
Yeah, I'm the Karen Black.
The children were played by 4 feet tall bodybuilders in the monster suits. I forget if we had discussed the possibility of it as a kaiju movie on your first episode, but certainly now with the suited actors, their explicit mention of special powers like strength and ESP, rather than alluding to a general tracking ability, and most importantly, their oversized nature, seems within the realm of possibility to me.
It is a tokusatsu film at the
There we
very
go.
least.
Yeah,
we can
all right.
say that.
All right, I'll take that. Suitimation, baby.
Yes, I mean, those babies would be right at home getting the shit kicked out of them by Kamen Rider.
That's right. And I would love to see it.
Make it happen, Larry.
Yeah. It was supposed to go direct to video, but after Salem's Lot 2 did okay, they said they put this in a very, very limited theater run in 1987, and that it did okay too. Good job, Larry. He said that he was worried in the commentaries, going, I figured after asking the audience to pay to see it twice already, we owed it to them to give them a good look at the babies. I was probably wrong. And I don't know if I agree. You know,
I disagree.
Yeah, we've established through 1 and 2 that they have an interior self. We've already spent time exploring the effect on the parents. Let's start blending in a little more. You know, you can't just have the same thing 3 times in a row. It works for the first 2. I like the repeated themes, but this taking the turn that it does and focusing more on the babies, letting us see them and see them grow, I think was a really good choice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I love the first 2 films, but in general, I am the type of person, if your movie's called Slugs, it better have some fucking slugs. It's Alive 3, Island of the Alive, promises that we are going to see the titular alive. So I'm glad that this movie did not write a check that it couldn't cash.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of, Larry said he had the same budget for Returns to Salem Lot and this, and I saw a sketchy source that said $12 million budget for that. I don't know. It seems
doubtful.
Yeah, that
Very
seems
doubtful.
a little high.
I don't think the budget for all of his movies combined was $12 million.
So that's what I saw on the internet. Take that with a grain of salt, or 20 people out there. But let's get into the actual movie. It opens on this striking Gothic image, pouring rain in a Dutch-angled church exterior. Doesn't get more timeless than that. This was real rain outside the Puck building in Lower Manhattan, and shot by Daniel Pearl as the DP, who is known for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Really, really great work. I think he does a really cool job of making these places that we know and are very familiar with, like the pier, you know, the Santa Monica Pier that they're shooting on. It's a very familiar environment to us, but the way that they shoot it, these angles under the boardwalk and everything, I think really help it feel like a new place and feel almost a little alien.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where if you told me it was a soundstage on this first scene, I would have believed it, because I guess with the rain and the canted angles and the way they lit it, it definitely has like a little bit of a Ninja Turtles vibe to it. But I mean, right off the bat, it's just a very Larry Cohen movie. It's in New York for some reason, which I feel like is a continuity error that we can talk about a little bit later. There's a cop. He loves cops in his movies.
That's
and
right.
There's a cabbie who is more concerned about bitching about the situation than doing anything to help. And of course, the woman in the cab is his daughter.
The cabbie also really feels like a Stephen King character, like
Yeah,
a guy he would play in a movie.
Yes, absolutely. Like Jordy Verrill moved to New York.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, the woman is giving birth in the backseat. Something's wrong, she says weakly. And as the baby emerges, the cop, fairly cool to this point, all things considered, starts to freak out and reach for his gun, saying, "It's one of them!" But the mom and it's actually not one of them, it's one of the alive.
Yes.
But the mom stops him from shooting cleanly, giving the baby the opportunity it needs to chow down on all three before succumbing to its wounds. This scene was featured in the Dirty Harry sequel, The Deadpool, where Liam Neeson's character is a movie director that's murdered, and this is an example of what he's working on. And it was so funny for Larry to be like, more people probably saw this in that movie than ever actually went to go see it by itself.
Yeah, I was thinking, I kind of want to watch the Deadpool now. That actually sounds like a very interesting movie.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Hey, Dirty Harry, he's back and dirtier than ever. That's what I hear.
And Liam Neeson's there directing mutant baby movies.
Hell yeah.
And this one, like, I think just this very first scene, it's like a little hint of like things are going to be different from the previous two, because I think the cop, the gore on his hand is quite a bit like more graphic than anything that was in the previous two films.
Yeah, those were extremely understated, which is certainly interesting and helps to make you like really focus on the theming in it and everything. And a lot of the kills are very like artistic, like the blood mixing in with the milk when he kills the milkman and everything. But with this, it's straight up, like he rips off the guy's arm and there he is waving the stump and he fucking kills it. That's some baby, as James Dixon's Lieutenant Perkins says.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about with the continuity error. So James Dixon back, reprising his role for the third time. He's a Cohen regular.
The only one in all three movies, and still pursuing this case, but now mustached.
Of his 18 film credits, 16 of them are Larry Cohen, all of them playing some sort of law enforcement, except for The Stuff, where he plays a postman.
Wow.
But, so that
upgrade,
first
in my
scene's
opinion.
in New York, but he's an LA cop because he was in the first and second one. So how is this baby, like, why is he there? Either it's in New York and he's there for some reason, or it's not in New York.
Maybe it's like a task force. He's on the mutant baby task force, and they're sending him all over. He's got special extra jurisdictional powers.
I guess it's, this isn't the sort of movie to be like, got your ass, continuity error. But you watch it 3 times and things start to stick out to you.
Definitely.
And I think this scene in the church is sort of the first hint at a greater intelligence in the babies. Like you said in the first two, they were talking about they home in on their parents, but it's almost like an animal instinct. Mm-hmm. But in this scene, I don't know if this is how you took it, but the James Dixon character is like, I wonder why this baby went into this church. And then we see some of the baby's blood in the water of the baptismal font.
Right.
So for me, it was almost like the baby had remorse for killing those people and was trying to baptize itself to wash away its original sin.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, hints at higher intelligence, how a newborn is so intimately aware of Catholicism. I don't know.
It makes me think Catholicism is true. It must be.
That's the real religion.
This baby just knows. He says, fuck, I gotta get baptized. I'm going to purgatory otherwise. It does take... Well, first of all, there's another funny line where he says, you guys ever see a baby like this? It's just really great delivery. James Dixon, he should have had a bigger career than just with Larry, but I do have to respect it.
He's great at playing a cop.
Yeah. And the baby took 4 shots before dying. It still managed to crawl bleeding into the church to baptize itself. And it is not only, letting you know about this higher intelligence, but also really lets you know the tone right away. You know, we've seen the gore. We have this darkly comic moment to not undercut it, but to, just be like, yeah, we're going to be laughing. We're going to be gasping at the violence. It's all over the place in a great way.
Yeah, we're gonna do the sign of the cross when we look up at the stained glass.
So true, so true. They're being born faster than we can kill them, one cop casually remarks. And we enter the lovely series recurring title sequence, very Phase 4. But the rushing water feels almost womb-like, with the changing psychedelic colors and Herman's lullaby turning nightmarish.
Simple yet effective, and I just watched Return to Salem's Lot last night, just because, all of the talk about it. Basically, they use the exact same thing, substituting fire for water.
Wow.
But it still looks good.
Wow, it's thematic. It's of his like. But these government-sanctioned kills are being litigated in court as we come back in. There are 5 alives in custody, and the prosecution is fighting for a stay of execution, basically. Crazy crane shot as we pull all the way from the bench to the audience. He's like, yeah, we had a huge courtroom. They let us use the biggest one. The defense is played by Garrett Graham, who people might know from the former best horror movie ever made, Phantom of the Paradise, as Beef. And he's quick to say, don't fall for the maudlin appeal for sympathy of calling them infants or even human beings.
He is great at playing an asshole. I always remember him as the foster father in Child's Play 2.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael Moriarty I first was familiar with as Harry Potter, the father from Troll.
Wow.
So when I first saw this movie, I was like, wow, they got every actor who's ever played a father to be in this scene.
I actually mostly remember Michael Moriarty as Harry Potter, the wizarding world of. And then people are like, oh, it's Daniel Radcliffe. And I'm like, no, I think I would know about that. I'm pretty sure it's Michael Moriarty. So it's really challenging talking about that series sometimes. But luckily, I don't have to do that much anymore because of the author. So
if you join Slytherin, the asshole wins. You don't want the asshole to win.
Eat them! Eat them! This does draw an outburst from Michael Moriarty's Stephen Jarvis, spokesperson for the parent group. He says, my child is a human being, you son of a bitch! And Larry talked about how he had lost his acting career and marriage as a result of this sad experience, so part of his passion is simply trying to salvage what he can by keeping the child alive, which I thought was really interesting motivation.
Yeah, he's acting his ass off here.
Yeah, and it almost results in his being tossed from the courtroom, but the defense asks that he remain because they're going to bring in his son as an exhibit. And everyone's worried because if Mr. Jarvis seems scared of his son, it'll seem like he's been bullshitting this whole time, putting a huge hole in their credibility, and they'll lose the case. So in the cage is wheeled, to the sound of much jeezing and some cries from the baby.
Is that a baby? It's like, yes, that's what the fucking case is about. It's a baby.
They couldn't hear anything, so when it shows up, they go, whoa! But they asked Jarvis to identify this as his own, cajoling him closer and closer to the cage. But there is a sympathy that Jarvis feels for the baby, scared of the lights and the guns and able to feel the tension in the room. So he says, hey dude, I can't just look in here, I gotta touch you, okay? Otherwise, the asshole is gonna win. But when he does, the courtroom erupts! And the cops yank him away, and this angers the baby, who stop-motion styly rips off his chains and bends the bars, leaping out and for the judge.
He's not locked in there with you. You're locked in there with him. He's letting you know.
So true. And it's only thanks to some quick action by Mr. Jarvis that the baby is calmed. How would you feel if you were born into a world that looked at you and wanted you dead? He's just a baby. There must be some place on Earth they could go.
Yeah, he's going so big right here, and that Herman score is doing some very heavy lifting because that little monologue could easily come off poorly.
Definitely. And it's so funny to think about him explicitly being like, yeah, we're making it up as we go. And for Michael Moriarty to have to just be like, doing this off the dome is so funny. I
just love this scene. It's probably my favorite scene of this movie. I think in your first Letterboxd review, you said something along the lines of how this one might be your favorite, but it only makes sense if you've seen the escalation.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. And this scene is really illustrative of that thing. It's something that I talk about a lot, despite not really being able to articulate what it is very well. But I just love when a series of movies approaches its story with a sense of verisimilitude, which is to say, take Godzilla movies as an example. So in each movie, the world is brought to the brink of destruction by Godzilla and whatever other monsters are there. And then at the beginning of the next movie, everything is just fine again. It's like it never happened.
Right.
Especially in those early Showa ones, it's kind of like every single time they're like, how can we stop Godzilla? And you're like, just do the same thing you did the last 5 times.
He's been here over and over.
Get used to it. It's not really until Godzilla 84 that the writers actually stop and think, okay, what would be the consequences if something like that were to happen in the real world, and what would society look like afterwards? And I love 84 for that, but that's the exception rather than the rule in franchise storylines, whether you're talking Godzilla or Friday the 13th or the MCU.
Yeah.
What's great about the It's Alive trilogy is that it does exactly that. What if for no discernible reason mutant babies are being born? In the first one, it's okay, there's only one, so let's kill it and move forward. In the second, it's like, okay, this keeps happening. Now the government is getting involved, trying to kill these babies before they're born.
Right, and the people who feel regret over it are trying to stop it, and it's getting harder to keep it under wraps.
Frank Davis is the mutant baby Harriet Tubman in that one.
That's right.
And so that brings us to Island of the Alive. It's something that society has been dealing with for like a decade at this point. And there's now court cases attempting to answer the difficult question of what to do with these babies. And I love that.
Yes, I think that it is really fascinating, and it is something that doesn't happen very often. And it really helps you feel brought into the world. It makes it so that it feels like it is taking advantage of the fact that you've seen the other two in a way that others don't, where it is an escalation, but it has to happen that way, because otherwise we would go, oh, this is crazy. Otherwise we go, this is an insane over-the-top thing. But because we spent 2 movies seeing this government conspiracy that is struggling to free itself and get out into the open, it feels earned in a way that it or otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, if this were the first movie, you're asking a lot of the audience to accept these babies as adults with telekinetic powers living on an island. But in the third, it makes perfect sense. Yes, it's all coming together. I think one of the things people like to talk about a lot is like, in regards to like the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, is like how it's only bad because it had no guiding hand and they didn't have a plan beforehand. I think that trilogies like this are kind of proof that that's not true. There's no way that he planned that. There's no way he planned Island of the Alive in 1974. He didn't know where this was going. All it takes is like people that give a shit. Right.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, based on just how many times he talked about like finding the pitch in the waiting room. Definitely I don't think that there was a ton of planning going into this, but it does work, and yeah, it uses the other ones as a great jumping off point and as an actual foundation, and not just a title to get your butt in the seat.
Yeah, and also, you know, going back to the stop motion baby, I fucking love it.
Oh, so good.
I mean, the design has always been good. Rick Baker made it, but I think we may have talked about this in It's Alive episode, but that was 4 years ago, so who cares? Larry Cohen paid Rick Baker like $250 to make that baby, because It's Alive was like 7 years before American Werewolf in London. So Rick Baker, he was apprenticing under Dick Smith. He wasn't the Rick Baker we know today. So he was able to get that for $250. And Larry was like, yeah, just make it. It's not going to be in the movie. It's just something for the actors to look at off screen.
Right.
So the original baby didn't move at all. But then Larry's like, no, I'm going to show it on screen. So
Too bad. You did too good a job. I like it too much.
Yeah. For 2 movies, we've been stuck with this great design without seeing what it can do. But finally, we get to see it in its most realized form possible. And it's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And the judge is moved and decides in favor of protecting the baby. So Jarvis goes to tell his ex-wife, Ellen. She was able to start over again after the baby was born because as even a commercial actor, Jarvis was the one that the press focused on. So she's moving on, but with a new man, and even had her tubes tied. She just says she had it done. Could be any procedure that would stop this from happening. But there's an interesting line that she says that I find myself echoing more and more these days, and just it reinforces Larry's prescience in terms of how can anybody be an expert on something they know nothing about? And like, not even about the heavy stuff, but even just with like, when you see people echoing like Wikipedia on podcasts and stuff instead of actually looking into it, and they are looked at as experts. And
you say that, but I feel that there are some podcasts that could benefit from reading Wikipedia once in a while. So.
One for sure in particular, I think, should be exclusively reading Wikipedia. It's the only way to get 5 stars, but other shows maybe should actually learn the information, in my opinion. And I just this line I thought was prescient as always from Larry.
Yeah, bringing in more of that Larry Cohen sadness of they have a discussion about they come to the conclusion that they probably would have broken up anyway, even if it were not for this baby, because they just simply didn't love each other enough.
Yeah, it's a pretty touching scene. She's clearly scarred by the event, sad for what could have been, but still proud of Stephen for saving their son. But she's like, I literally can't let myself think about what could have been. Like, it is too harmful to me emotionally. It's like, yeah, this was clearly awful, even just based on how people have reacted this far removed from the actual exposure to it. It is remarkable.
Yeah.
Stephen goes to blow off some steam at the boardwalk, seemingly having expected her to drop everything and take him back. I do think it's like a fascinating, honest look at a grand gesture like that, for her to be like, what did you expect to happen here? Like, yeah. Just interesting writing. And yeah, for that to, as always, be so improvised and so true to the characters, because it is them just having to find it, I find really interesting.
Yeah, and just true to, like, the human condition.
Yeah,
it plays much more realistic in that way.
He's doing well at the games, but the sex worker that sidles up to him is showing him up big time, which is pretty funny. He just rolls up, eyeballs him, and like, this guy probably has a humiliation fetish.
This scene was so funny to me the first time I was rewatching it. The sex worker is Laureen Landon, who's another Cohen regular. She's also played Velda in I, the Jury. But she's dressed in like the least sexy outfit imaginable. She looks like she shops exclusively at army surplus stores. And Michael Moriarty's like, no, I'm not interested, until she starts doing really well at the carnival games.
It's also, I mean, this outfit sets up her gag of, he says, you got a great arm. And she says, wait until you see the rest of me. And it works because you cannot see any of her.
Right.
This is a funny one-liner. It's followed up by an even better sight gag of her apartment being covered in stuffed animals that she's one working the area, which you go, oh, that's why she's so good, is because she's just there all the time. Very, very funny. They're getting frisky, but suddenly she starts to recognize him, and he turns into a cold fish. He's not quick enough to get out, though, and she finally places him. And again, in just like a character subversion where you really expect one thing and it does the complete opposite, he doesn't shrink from it. And he says, that's who I am, very defiantly. And I just love that as a character choice. It feels like it would be so easy for him to be like, oh, he's cowardly at the beginning and needs to learn how to reckon with like being the father in the truth that he is. But for him to already accept that about himself and to sort of take this into himself and use it almost as a shield, as a cudgel, I find, just really interesting. And for Michael Moriarty to be able to communicate that effectively instead of having it be clunky and hard to distinguish, I think is just really fantastic.
Yeah, and just that choice, whether it was improvised by him or in the actual script of like, I'm Stephen Jarvis, that's who I am.
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting way to put that.
Yeah, it's my name, sir. He goes full Crucible mode. And the tables turn, and she tries to get him to go now, while he says, they've run tests, I'm healthy, it's not catching. And she fearfully questions this. How do you know? How does anybody know? And this fear leads to complete rejection, not only saying you should tell people who you are before you touch them, but even turning down his filthy freak money. You're sick, and you make me sick too.
Yeah, this scene sort of sets the tone of the first third of the movie, which is basically about how people that go through traumatic events, especially these highly publicized ones, are just constantly being re-traumatized to the point that it becomes their whole identity, and not by choice. It's something that they talk about in the first It's Alive when John P. Ryan is giving his speech about Frankenstein and how everyone confuses Frankenstein with the monster to the point that everyone just calls the monster Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely talk about this as it comes up with the book in particular. But right in this area around what we just talked about, there's a really quick scene of TV like exploiting the Jarvis family misery for ad revenue, right? He's on there talking about his experience and they go, oh, hey, that sounds awful. And we'll be right back after these messages. It's so quick, but it's so incisive and cutting. And I really love it. I
misheard it, but I'm pretty sure what the guy says is like he makes a joke, we'll be right back after these impotent messages.
Oh, man.
Which just adds to like, what the fuck?
Yeah, definitely. The 5 babies are quarantined on a remote island thanks to the judge saying, yes, we have no right to harm them, but they're incompatible with our way of life. So they're to be abandoned and left to develop as nature sees fit. Woof. But better than the Death Squad. So the problem is, well, first of all, we get some great shots of the island in question as we helicopter over, and our POV shots from the ground are unfocused and from a low angle, let you know that we're in the baby's shoes, so to speak. Baby's shoes never worn except by us. And the helicopter unleashes several men with hunting rifles. This is Cabot and his goons. One must assume this is the cheese tycoon in an alternate universe where it's also a Johnson & Johnson type empire that does sunscreen and bug spray, and not so coincidentally, the drug that may or may not have caused the mutation.
Yes. I think at this point in the commentary, Larry Cohen says, I guess definitively is maybe not the right word, but he says there's no explanation for it.
Right. Which is great. I love that.
Yes.
But Cabot, as the fat cats tend to be, is not just content to have gotten away scot-free. He wants to put the drugs back on the market under a new name in a couple years, and they're here to make sure no dirty scientists can stir up any trouble by testing the infants when that happens.
Gotta kill those babies.
That's right. But they're ready to defend their turf. And they quickly pincer around to dispatch a goon on the waterfall, and there's one behind Cabot and a reluctantly brought along board member. It's a very fun action scene. It kind of comes out of nowhere because you really expect this to be like, oh, okay, now we're on the island. They're going to be hunting them for a while. And it's like, no, they show up and are immediately murdered.
Yeah, the waterfall kill is very funny.
Definitely. And this area in particular prompted a pretty crazy story from Larry about the complications of shooting on location. It looks great, obviously, but while they were shooting, they heard a huge crack, and it turns out a logjam further up the river had finally given way. And suddenly this became Niagara Falls, basically. People were scattering in terror from the approaching flood, and one guy, Art Lund, who was tied up in a tree, was like, oh, I'm fine. But they still had to free him from what was now a raging river and not dry shoreline. We do see it as it became later, and it is a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. It's also actually very odd to see location shooting in a Larry Cohen film that isn't just stolen shots of New York City.
Right, yeah. The documentary, look, they brush over a lot of stuff, but they cover in depth his fascination and ability for stealing shots, and for that, I am very happy with the documentary.
Yes, it is. That stuff in particular is insane.
Yeah, I love when they're talking about, like, you never fell out of the car. What the hell? Like, that's a Larry lie.
Yeah, it was very much like Charlie Murphy and Rick James.
Yep, exactly, exactly. They flee in terror, but it's no use. The board member tries to hide like the Fellowship from the Nazgul, and Cabot has his arm ripped off, but they're left to their fate by the pilot, until the baby that snuck aboard leaps out, sends the chopper plummeting, blood splashed across the window in a moment that legitimately startled me on my first watch since whenever I watched all three the first time. It's also a very fun explosion. It's just a great scene. This quick, brutal violence, the explosion, the helicopter usage, the location. That's A-okay in my book there, Larry.
Oh, yeah. I also love the trope that the helicopter pilot does. It's like, no, I cannot possibly spare 2 seconds to save this other person. I must take off immediately.
That's right. And, I mean, look, he pays for it with his life as well, so...
As he should.
Yeah.
Really cool helicopter, too. I really was digging the stripes on that.
Yeah, it was pretty sick. He was making it work, and that was why he was like, well, I can't let them fuck up my helicopter. I need to get the hell out of here, I guess. We do jump to a party, which, as we said, is at Larry's own house. Last seen as a former child's school in It's Alive Part 2, and a good luck charm, he said. And this is where we see Stephen being uncomfortable, being pressured to write a book and profit off this, especially with the lawyer saying, oh, I tried to cut my costs, but it was just too much. It's like,
yeah, it's
that's
like, what
the
fuck does that even mean? Yeah. You make up your own costs.
Yeah. Then also being like, oh, we don't even need to ask you. We tricked you into signing away the rights to the story with the contract already anyway.
Yeah.
Stephen says, if you got everything all all sewn up. If you got everything all sewn up, why are you talking to me for? And they quietly are like, we want those family photos. Cripes. Someone approaches him for an autograph. This is the wife of Bob Kane, co-inventor of Batman with Little Billy Finger, friend of Larry, which pisses him off even more. He says, hey, I was an actor for 14 years and never got asked for an autograph. Best regards, Stephen Jarvis, father of the monster.
Get her ass.
That's right. He also tells a joke I must admit is funny when she's aghast at his glibness. He says, they took baby Jarvis in for his shots. Too bad he stole the gun from the doctor.
Yeah. So the first It's Alive was made during a different period of his career. Like after Full Moon High in 81 and Q in 82, that's when you start to see some of that signature humor. So I would say that even though It's Alive, the first one is a great film, this, because of that, is much more of a classically Cohen film. In this scene, his Borscht Belt comedy aspirations are really coming through, because this is very Rodney Dangerfield-esque type riffs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Hey, and Stephen doesn't get any respect, so there's that connection as well.
I have heard that.
The hospital is shutting down research on the cause. No more fear, no more money. No more murders, no more interest. The doctor also says he heard Stephen was writing a book on Entertainment Tonight. And so it's a foregone conclusion. And he writes it, and it's a smash hit.
Yeah.
He guiltily looks at the window display, declaring it a bestseller. And Ellen throws her copy in the fire in disgust at its contents.
Yeah, like we touched on earlier, this has now become his entire identity.
Yeah. Back at the cave, there's a brief scene of a glowing in a cave that is alluded to later as well, where they're talking about how it was a nuclear... Oh, and earlier they talk about how it was a nuclear testing place, and that's why no humans have ever lived there, but possibly the alive are not only existing with radiation, but thriving on it, as we'll later learn. Or that's postulated.
I love that for them.
Yeah,
personally.
That's right. They earned it. Stephen is working as an assistant manager at the children's shoe store to make ends meet. The ultimate humiliating job, according to Larry. The Jarvis humiliation fetish back in action.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a fucked up thing for him to say in the commentary. He's like, the only thing worse than being a shoe salesman is being a children's shoe salesman. God, I hope you didn't have any shoe salesman fans, Larry.
Not anymore, he doesn't. Not after that.
I love this scene, though. I think it is very funny.
It's so funny. He miserably lets these customers in on the shoe store conspiracy to ruin children's feet. What are you doing, Stephen?
Also throws in an ad-libbed plunk your magic twanger froggy at the end, which I had to look up. It is from a TV show in the 50s called Smilin' Ed McConnell and His Buster Brown Gang. So
You had to look that up? You're not familiar with that show? You don't talk about it all the time and reference that line all the time?
Apologies to all the Smilin' Ed heads out there.
Yeah,
this is my first introduction.
All right, I guess, look, we'll see. Maybe I might have to cut this. This is fucked up, dude.
We'll have to have a come to Jesus talk about this.
Yeah. After the app. So, the police officer Perkins that we've seen throughout the movie approaches Stephen to tell him the judge has died, and Dr. Swenson is in charge now. But he's interested in them as test subjects, and wants to see how the last 4 years have treated them, so he's rounding the old crew up for one last job to the Island of the Alive.
Yeah. We haven't talked about how that is just one of the best subtitles for a movie of all time.
We haven't. If we didn't talk about it in this lead up, it was definitely going to be talked about in my finale because holy shit, Island of the Alive, insanely good title.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what brought me into Larry Cohen movies is I saw the triple feature DVD and I was like, It's Alive 3, Island of the Alive. That is the best/worst/best again subtitle I've ever seen. It's in the Pantheon up there with House 2, The Second Story.
That's right.
It's great.
It's About Time is also a great one,
yes.
The Amityville. But even It's Alive 2, It Lives Again. I mean, that's a classic one too.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there in the title.
That's
Island
right.
of the Alive.
That's right. In the lead-up preparations, the doctors refer to them as creatures. It's a casual reveal that they, too, don't view them as human. We also hear the government representative is pushing for them to kill one and take it back for internal examination. Oh, don't worry, it won't be his, of course.
That is one of the things that really pisses me off. And I know it's just a movie and it was written this way, so I have to temper that. But it's like, they're obviously human.
Yeah.
They are born of two human parents. Like,
Right.
It was just a fact that they're human.
Yep. Yeah, it's very fucked up. It is very funny when Stephen shoots the doctor with the tranquilizer to prove it won't hurt them. Also, Perkins is great for some laughs on the trip, including when he asks the doctor to look at a spot, and he's like, I'm not that kind of doctor!
Yes, very Larry Cohen. And that doctor is played by director Neil Israel, director of Surf Ninjas.
Hell yeah. Eventually they make it and head ashore. Jarvis is still keeping it light. After all, kids love clowns, he says. And the kids are well aware that they've arrived.
There's a scene right when they're on the boat where you pointed out his fit, with the Moriarty fit. And I think the singing scene, he's like singing an old sea shanty, which again was ad-libbed, which blows my mind that the four other people on this boat knew this sea shanty because I've never heard it in my life.
Oh, you didn't know that one, Chris?
No, this is just another thing on the list. I think it's these kind of scenes that take a lot of people out of his movies, but I think it draws me in even more because there's a truth to it.
Yeah.
It's funny, but there's no jokes. I think most movies are kind of afraid to have more than one tone to them. Like if it's a sad movie, it's going to be sad. If it's a comedy, everything's funny, but that's just not how real life is.
Yeah.
And it would be unrealistic for Stephen to just be a sad sack throughout this movie, especially 5 years on
Right.
from the birth of his child and the whole court case.
Right. Even if he had started that way, that transmutes into something else over the course of time. And I think that his sort of like bitter mania feels so honest. It really does.
Yeah.
They rest at the waterfall, and the group splits. The doctor heads for the water to wash up. Jarvis yells into the woods, attempting to placate the children. Perkins and another doctor discover some brand new scuba gear. Someone must have been here. But why would they leave it unless... And in addition to the scuba gear, we also see a rubber chicken at the bottom of the frame, frequently hidden on set to fuck with Larry and make him reshoot. And apparently this didn't stop just because they went to Hawaii.
Yeah, and so I actually James Dixon is like holding it in his hand and moving it. Like, I don't know how he didn't see it.
He's like, the one time they got it over on me, and he's like waggling around at the bottom of the frame. It's like, okay, Larry, you probably should have caught that one.
Yeah.
The mission, though, is declared a failure because someone else made initial contact, so they're going to fall back. But as the doctor looks for the rest of them, he stops dead. And then is dead. Because the kids launched their attack, taking out Swenson as well. And the guy in the monster suit almost drowned here because he was supposed to emerge from the water, but his suit filled up and he just never emerged. So Neil Israel had to dive in after him and drag him out. Hero of the day, honored with a dinner party, they said. Mm-hmm. Well earned, Neil.
It's so crazy when you look back at movies like this and think about how many people almost died to make... I mean, I love this movie, but it's not a movie of note in the larger canon of the history of film.
Yes. Look, it was so funny in the documentary when someone calls him like the ultimate pre-9/11 director. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you just cannot make movies the way that he did because of safety precautions.
And arguably shouldn't.
Yeah, right.
But we're grateful that they were made.
Right, exactly. The government agent hears Jarvis warning the kids to wait them out and says, "How can you side with them against the human race?" Another just very fucked up line. They find the corpse stuck up the tree, and Jarvis is like, they're right to do it.
Yep.
This is the guy who was stuck there for an hour and a half with the flood. And they head for the boat, but they find one. He is tranked with several darts, though Jarvis pretends to kill it as the other two keep moving. He can also tell that it's not his son. And it's the helicopter all over again, as one is waiting in the transition boat, mauling the government agent while Perkins and Jarvis make good their escape. Amazing gore as her face is torn apart. Just looks fantastic. And yeah, so they make good their escape, but not too good, because the main boat also has the Alive aboard, and they've killed everybody else, and scare Perkins into diving aboard and swimming back to shore. Jarvis stays on board, though. "I did everything I could for you," he says, and recounts in disbelief how shortly ago they were all sitting here singing. But he's interrupted by the screaming of a child. "What the hell? Did one of you give birth? They really do advance quick. That means I'm a grandfather." Okay, Larry. I mean, well, Michael delivering that line, really just, as you've sort of mentioned over and over again, it really is kind of fascinating how these are lines that, if you look at them and when I say them, you're like, that is the corniest shit I have ever heard. But when you see it delivered by someone who is genuinely in the moment and believing it and living it for this movie, he makes it work. He really does.
Yeah, you just can't say enough about him in this movie. You really can't.
Mm-hmm. Perkins is still ashore. "Don't leave me here in this fucking sun. My doctor said no sun." They're chartered to disembark in Florida because baby Jarvis, now full grown and father himself Jarvis, seemingly wants to kill his mother for the combo of giving birth to him and rejecting him. That's the implication that we're led to believe.
Right.
Stephen is a little conflicted about bringing the Alive back, but they can hear thoughts telepathically, so he can't try to scuttle the boat or anything, but he's getting worried, especially as the corpses begin to disappear into the cargo hold, and they're using too much fuel, thanks to his inexperience. There's a really great shot as they peer in at him writing in his hold. The claustrophobia is on full display. Just really great stuff.
Yeah. There's also a scene earlier on the boat that I forgot to bring up where Moriarty and I think the guy that's hanging in the tree later are just talking to the captain of the boat, asking him questions about captaining a boat. I'm pretty sure that was just an actual conversation they had on set.
It's like, "Oh, you navigate by the moon?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, the moon and the stars and the sun."
Why do you turn the wheel so far?
"Oh, well, we have to bring it back, so it has to meet the motion." It's like, what? Okay, I guess. But as they run low on resources, Stephen is thrown overboard by his son, although it seems to be protective, as his son doesn't want him to get eaten and gives him a door to float on. This raft immediately gets carried out by the current, and when we see it again completely isolated, with him ironically in danger of being eaten again, though this time by sharks, it's just seconds later in reality. They literally couldn't even keep up with the support boat. Again, things that you go, wow, it looks great. Maybe shouldn't have been allowed, but, this is how it went back then.
Yeah, I mean, they talked a lot about how choppy the seas were, and you see that boat rocking back and forth pretty violently. It seems like this part would have been miserable to shoot.
Yeah. He floats ashore in Cuba and begs them to warn Cape Vale, which is a made-up city, but that's the town that they've been in. Although he is delighted at the ironic twist of not being remembered, though he has to go all the way to Cuba for it. And the Alive have made it to the Cape, and they start their reign of terror. This is the Santa Monica Pier, and Larry said, after being here so many times, it was fun to own it for a night, which I thought was very cute.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally, like, there's probably a million places in your city where if you just got to tell people what to do there for an hour, you'd be like, this is awesome. I come here all the time. Now I'm in charge.
Ellen feels unease, but doesn't know why, so she's cutting out of work, and she's stopped by Tony. I thought I told you I didn't want to see you anymore, Tony. He warns her about the boat crashing into the marina full of dead bodies. And she says, now why does that give me the chills? Maybe because it's a fucking boat full of dead bodies, Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the Alive, it's at the very least a Nosferatu.
Yes, absolutely. You cannot be having those wash up ashore. Tony is strong-arming Ellen for some company, telling her that he discovered the book while he was hanging out by the porno section. His speech to her is so bizarre and funny. And he says he's going to reveal the truth to everyone and blow up her life unless she gets in the car.
Yeah, 5 years later, still she thought she had escaped it because she didn't have to bear the brunt of most of it. But once again, continuing to be re-traumatized by this thing.
That's right. Fireworks are going off. Perfect timing as we approach summer here. Also perfect cover for the Cubans to smuggle Jarvis ashore. And it turns out they actually listen to him because they're human beings. Wow, how about that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole Cuban thing definitely, at first blush, seems like it's out of nowhere. But I think it ties into the themes in a nice way towards the end.
Definitely, even just in terms of like the ostracization and like dehumanization of people who maybe don't fit into a certain mold. And then being like, oh, if you don't treat them like they're freaks, then they will be normal to you.
There's also, like, I know Larry Cohen was repeatedly accused of being a commie throughout his career, so maybe there's just a small piece of like, hey, so what? They're not so bad.
That's right. In the commentary, when he sees the photo, he's like, our old friend Fidel Castro. Okay, Larry. But yeah, it turns out they actually listen to him. They also give him a gun for defense. Good luck with your son. Hope you don't have to shoot him, they say, which is funny. Also funny when he trips over some kids smooching in the dunes and they scream, hey, watch where you're going, you fucking asshole. And he just says, I'm home.
Yeah, that screams written by a New Yorker right there.
And Alive is spotted rooting through Mom's locker at work. And a big gang fight also breaks out, making sure the cops are occupied.
Yeah, so this is one thing I wanted to talk about because in the commentary, I think it is very funny that Larry Cohen is like, oh, yeah, there's this street fight. That's real production value. Because it honestly happens for almost no reason and doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the movie other than it's like a roundabout way to get more victims for the Alive. But Larry's just kind of like, oh, there's 20 people on screen. Now that's production value. Yeah,
he's juiced about it. Whoa, look at that motorcycle go by.
Yeah, it is so weird.
The gang was chasing a woman, but an Alive fends off the attackers. But the cops arrive and blow this Alive away. Stephen gets Ellen's address and goes to check on her. And Tony is there, slapping her and freaking out when she pukes in his car. And in fact, he's ready to kill her for what she did, but is grabbed by an Alive and killed with a swiftness.
God, this fight between Karen Black and Tony is so fucking funny to me.
Yes. Oh, the puking moment is insane.
Yeah, she pukes in his car. He keeps calling her a son of a bitch, which is not something a man would usually call a woman. And she just has the most insanely shrill scream. It's this
Get the
fight
fuck out of here!
Seems so real to me, like something you would hear outside your window in a big city. Mm-hmm. Like it's just, there's something that is just so real about this. It's very funny.
Yeah, for a movie about growing mutant children, there is an absolute honesty to a lot of it.
Yeah.
Ellen dreams of the birth and wakes up in terror, but it doesn't end with the waking because an Alive is breaking in through her window. And she runs out screaming for help, but spots Tony's corpse and has no time to scream again before she's grabbed by the head and lifted directly up, which is very funny.
Yeah, I think Jason copied that in one of his movies.
Yeah, that's right. Stephen arrives, and he hears the crying of the baby, but he's moving slow, and the cops have arrived too, so there is a ticking clock. He tries to comfort Ellen, and she relaxes a little bit now, and she points out the rash on the cowering family, which coincides with the doctors testing the same rash on the one that was shot, and we hear that it is measles, and it's killing them. Wow. What a, shocking revelation. The first time that I saw this, I was just like, oh, okay, measles. But then for this to be like, oh, that's the kind of thing that you get vaccinated for at birth when you have parents who are taking care of you.
Holy shit.
That is the cause of their death and their downfall is so poignant and potent and so, like you said, not focused on. These things that are so rich and add so much to the movie are just detail. They're just icing on the cake. It's so fascinating. And so many other movies, it wouldn't be that way.
Yeah, it's really crazy how all of this stuff just comes together in what is like a pretty slapdash, like shooting from the hip production.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy how fully formed some of these ideas are given the time and budget constraints.
Absolutely. They want her to take the baby, and she says she can't do it. But Stephen says you can't run away from your own son, and she faces her fear, taking the baby and apologizing for hurting them. And the cops are on the roof now. They spot the group, and these sick ones collapse, holding hands as they wait to become unalive. And all that's left is the defender, who holds the cops off long enough to let Stephen and Ellen escape. Plenty of funny cops swan diving off the roof, although they do eventually overtake this guy, which is sad.
Yeah, that's what we call production value in the biz. Swan dives off the roof.
Yeah! Again, just so many things that are like, they had a stuntman who had a lot of pull on this.
Yeah.
But even these cops are struck by the love shared between the two holding hands there. And Ellen, Stephen, and the baby steal a car and hit the road without a nickel to their name. Finally, a true family. It's a really awesome last scene. I love that they don't know how they're going to make it work, but that they just have to put their trust in each other and that they have grown and that they're the next stage in evolution in many ways. And how about that?
The real island of the alive was the friends we made along the way.
Everyone is saying this. It's so true. It bears repeating. Yeah, absolutely. And now, Chris, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up why this isn't just a good movie, but is in fact the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as the listeners can tell, I think we both have a pretty genuine love for this movie. Mm-hmm. There is no kayfabe here. This is the best horror movie ever made.
Yep.
Because It's Alive is the best horror trilogy ever made. And this movie is the perfect finale to that trilogy. It builds on the other two in a really interesting way, which we talked a lot about. It keeps the emotional and thematic weight of the first two and adds some of that signature Cohen levity to the mix. We also finally get to see the mutant babies on screen in their most realized form, and we even get to see them as weird, cannibalistic humanoid island dwelling adults. C.H.I.D.s, if you will.
And I will. I absolutely will.
We have great performances from a cast of Cohen regulars, especially Michael Moriarty, but also James Dixon, Andrew Duggan, Laureen Landon, Kevin O'Connor. And you throw in parts for Karen Black, Garrett Graham, McDonald Carey, and they're all fully committed to giving it their best.
Yeah.
What a great cast. And thinking back on what Cohen was saying about the genesis of It's Alive and how it all stems from parents in the 70s not being able to relate to their children to the point of being afraid of them, Island of the Alive is a really hopeful resolution to that conflict. Mm-hmm. That quote that I read at the top smacks a lot of the ongoing American fear of the dissolution of the nuclear family. And Island of the Alive is all about how it is exactly that fear that is the problem.
Right.
The babies lash out because we're afraid of them, but once Stephen Jarvis learns not to be afraid of them, they're no longer dangerous. And it's the same for the Cubans. And this final scene is beautiful in its own killer baby mutant horror movie way, because it's just saying, let go of that fear. Everything will be okay. We are a separated but now reunited couple raising our telepathic mutant grandson, and that's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Society is going to change, and that's okay as long as we all love each other. It's an oddly sweet ending for a mutant baby movie, and that is exactly why this is the best horror movie ever made.
Wow. I'm crying over here, folks. I totally agree. I think that for this to take a movie like It's Alive, which we've already established as the first best horror movie ever made, and to not only live up to it, but to truly use it as a foundation, to build on it in every way, and use it as fodder and fertile soil for these really fascinating themes that have emerged so organically as to almost be unbelievable, right? It's incredible, as you've said, that it manages to come together as coherently as it does, based on his style of shooting, the budget that they had, and even just thinking about like how many people need to be able to work with a director like that for nobody to put in a performance that makes this drag in a way is not just incredible, but like shocking.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really like It's Alive too, but when I think about the lead performance and Ryan's performance in the first movie, and to a lesser extent his performance in the second one, because he's sort of the co-lead in that one. But Michael Moriarty is such an incredible partner in this relay race. Like, he really takes the baton and figuratively runs it across the finish line in such a fascinating way that really does feel different, but also of alike. You know, it has this same pathos and this same desperation that they have in the first two. But his mania that comes, I think, partially just because we are looking at it this far down the road, this situation. It's had time to develop into that, right. Which that's another check for this, that it's giving us the time to look at how this has evolved. But yeah, him just being able to knock the performance out of the park and do something so unique with it while also feeling very believable, right? It is so over the top. We've talked about these crazy lines, but through it all, he feels grounded still somehow. It's honestly unbelievable. I don't know how he does it, but he does have this kind of anchored feeling despite the craziness that we're seeing on screen, and it really does all revolve around Michael Moriarty. As you sort of talked about, the writing being the beginning phases of his humor being on display. I think this movie's really funny. I do. I think that it's great, and I love seeing that fully developing Larry tone that is sort of darkly comic while also having those great gore effects. I think that that's fantastic. The sets are wonderful in terms of being able to go to Hawaii and be like, yeah, we're fucking shooting the monster movie where Jurassic Park is going to be in a few years. It's just remarkable. I think that, as you said, the entire cast does a great job. The guys in the suits, they do such a good job. Like, they have this bizarre canter as they move, right? Their physicality is so strange that they do just such a great job. Everyone feels terrified in the movie, and I think that that's very authentic, and I love it. And I think that this is the best horror trilogy of all time, and that this is the best horror movie ever made.
Co-signed.
Hell yeah. Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the show. Please tell people about Mount Molehill, which I absolutely adore. It's one of my favorite podcasts that I still make time for in a day and age where I have very little time to dedicate to podcasts. I see Mount Molehill, I say, hey, I'm putting that on right away. So tell them all about it.
Yes, I host that show. I pitch it as a podcast where even the smallest mysteries become mountains, which basically means that it's all about low-stakes mysteries that usually I have some sort of personal investment in. Perfect example of that is the first episode where I am searching for a lost jingle to a regional chain of restaurants called Pancho's Mexican Buffet that is not archived anywhere online. Did a whole pilot season of Mount Molehill, something I plan on doing more of. I have another season's worth of episodes mapped out, but I did move recently, and I've been more focused on other projects that are more related to my film archiving activities. So I can't say exactly when I'll be doing more Mount Hill, but it is planned.
Just something to look forward to.
Yeah, for me, the secret to podcasting is to do just enough that other people will invite you onto their shows. And
Hell yeah. Well, it worked.
yeah, I'm sure you can understand the liberating feel of not doing massive amounts of research every time you are on pod.
Absolutely. I am always very grateful to the 5DR guys for inviting me on, because I just can, like, when I listen back, I'm like, oh, I was a lunatic. Like, I feel truly unhinged on that show because they free me. They do a lot of work as well. They don't just read Wikipedia and
Probably should, though.
You probably should, but they don't, foolishly. So when I go on there, I am released, and I can just have a good time. And baby, I do. So
Yeah.
so definitely go check out those eps. Check out Mount Molehill, what exists. Check out if is Channel 83, that's still around, right? People can find it?
I don't know, to be honest.
Oh.
There's no website. I think it might still be like cached on
right.
like Spotify and all that.
Well, if you can find it, listen to it, because that was great too. There is at the very least the Pulgasari episode that you can listen to archived on this very feed.
Best ep of the show. So just listen to that one and be done with it.
Well, I certainly had a wonderful time on that episode. Pulgasari means a lot to me, and that was where it all started. Was learning about it through Chris for that episode. So really, really fun stuff. Definitely encourage you to check that out. As far as my plugs, I mean, whatever. Listen to the back catalog. There's all kinds of good stuff back there. The 5DR boys have been on multiple times. Chris has been on. Listen to the It's Alive episode. You know, even if the audio is rough, we're authentic and we're honest.
Yeah. It's exactly like a Cohen movie.
Yeah, exactly. So go check that out. If you're on the Patreon feed already, there's a Begotten episode as well. That was very fun to record. All kinds of great stuff.
I lost a legal thriller once.
That's right. Also a great time. So lots of great stuff back there. Look through, find a movie that appeals to you and listen to it, and you'll have a good time. I promise. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.